As we continue our study in the book of 1 Corinthians, we are ready for chapters 8, 9, and 10. Now, many people, as they read through these three chapters, and you need to be careful as you do, or you'll think he's changed the subject time and time again, but he has not. It's all dealing with the same question, the propriety of eating meat which had been offered in sacrifice to an idol. Now, we find the principle laid down and expounded for us in chapter 8. It is exemplified for us in chapter 9, and it is expanded and explained in chapter 10. So it's all the same subject through these three chapters. So that doesn't mean this will be excessively long, because it's so simple, it is easy to follow, not much to be explained except just a little explanation here and there in the reading of it. So it's a very simple thing. You see, 1 Corinthians is the simplest book in all of your Bible. The reason it is so simple and easy to understand is because it was written to carnal, fleshly believers. It did not grow very much. Remember, Paul said to them, I was never able to feed you with meat. I had to give you milk, even as infants in Christ, because you were carnal and you're still carnal. And so that's the reason. It is a very simple, easy to understand epistle. So keep your Bible open and follow with me, because we'll do a lot of reading through these three chapters in order to cover the subject which is here. Now, instructions concerning the eating of meat that had been offered in sacrifice to an idol. Now, we see the principle is expounded for us in chapter 8. Now, he began by saying, now, as concerning things offered unto idols. Now, remember, beginning with chapter 7, he's answering questions which had been asked him by means of a letter. So they'd ask him about this question. Now, as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. We all have a certain amount of knowledge about things, but just knowledge by itself puffs up. If you just have knowledge, you can be real proud and haughty and puffed up about the knowledge that you have. But charity, agape, a high value on God and fellow man, the love, edifies, it builds up. Now, you can build people up if you highly value them, but if you just have a knowledge without a love and a concern for people, then you're just going to be all puffed up in it, as if you're no better than someone else. But if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know, or it is necessary to know. You think you have a great knowledge of these things. You don't understand anything yet as you ought to. But if any man love or highly value God, the same, that is the same man, is known of or by him, that is by God. Now, if you highly value God, you love him or highly value him, he knows it, and he knows who it is that does highly value him. As concerning, therefore, the eating of those things which are offered in sacrifice to idols, we know. Now, here he has injected these clauses of explanation in between, and now we go back to the beginning, like in verse 1. Now, as concerning things offered unto idols, we know, now, verse 4, that an idol is nothing. Now, we know that an idol is nothing. It's nothing in the world. And we know that there is none other God but one. We know that as believers, that God is the only God there really is, and there is none other. Now, we understand that. For though there be that are called gods, in other words, there are many that are worshipped and considered as being gods, whether in heaven or in or upon earth, as there be gods many and lords many, that is, that are worshipped as gods and lords. But to us, Paul says, to me and to you Corinthian believers, you who are saved, there is but one God. There is but one God, who is the Father, out from whom are all things. So there's one God, the Father, out from whom comes all things, and we unto him, we in him, and one Lord. There's only one Lord, one Master Owner, who is Jesus Christ, by means of or through whom are all things. Now notice what he said here. All things are of the Father, but they were created by means of or through the person of Jesus Christ, and we by means of or through him. We were created by Christ. Now, in Colossians 1:15-19, we'll not take the time to turn there, but I'll remind you of that Jesus Christ is the agency of all creation. He brought all things into existence, and he's the one that holds all things together. Also, the Gospel of John chapter 1. Christ is the one who created. In the beginning, God created, but it was through the agency of the person of Christ that it was done. Now, howbeit, there is not in every man that knowledge. Not in every or all men. That word every is a plural word. Not in all men. All people do not have that understanding. Even many of those who are saved don't understand it yet. For some with conscience of the idol unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. Now, a person who's been saved and he goes to that idol temple and eat, he eats with a conscience of adoration and worship toward that idol, with a consciousness of it, not really understanding that there's only one God, our Creator God. But now their conscience is defiled by doing when they do that. But meat commendeth us not to God. We're not commended to God by meat, what we eat. For neither if we eat are we better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. It doesn't matter. And Romans 14:1-3 or 4, and a passage there talks about the same thing. That we're not to despise one another, and whether you eat all things or just vegetarian diet or whatever, God accepts every one. And so we're not any better or worse because of eating. For neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. It doesn't matter. Either way you go. But, although that's true, he said, take heed. Pay attention to yourself, lest by any means this liberty, this authority of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak. In other words, there are those who do not understand as much as you do. You know that if you eat that meat that's been offered in sacrifice to idol, it's a cheap way to get a meal, and you are eating it to get strength of your body to serve your God. You're not eating it with any conscience to the idol. But there's a weaker brother who knows that you're a stronger brother. He hasn't been saved as long. He doesn't understand as much. And so he sees you eating that meat, so he eats it, and he eats it with a consciousness toward the idol as with adoration toward that idol. And his conscience is defiled. Now notice what it says. This freedom of yours, this authority of yours, become a stumbling block to them that are weak. We can cause them to stumble in their Christian walk. For if any man see thee which hath knowledge, he knows that you have a knowledge and understanding of the things of the Bible and Christianity. He sees you sit at meat or reclining at the table in the idol's temple. Shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? Now, he's emboldened to do it, and he's eating it as if he had a consciousness toward the idol, not understanding what you do. And through, or he says, upon the basis of, the word through is epi, upon the basis of thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish or be destroyed for whom Christ died? I mean, you destroy his Christian walk in life. You cause him to stumble in these things, cause him to sin. He's defiled in his conscience. But notice, when ye so sin against the brethren, although eating that per se is not a sin, but he says if you do it and cause another one to stumble, then it becomes a sin. Now, he makes application of this throughout to all kinds of things. It doesn't mean just eating meat that offered to an idol. It means anything we do that would cause a weaker brother to stumble or to hinder our witness to the unsaved so that they would not receive Christ actually becomes a sin. Although it's not a sin per se, it becomes a sin if we do those things that hinder. But when ye sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, ye sin against Christ. You're sinning against Christ as well as that individual, because Christ is in him and you're causing him to stumble in that life that belongs to God. Now, Paul says, therefore, here's the whole principle wrapped up. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend or to stumble. Now, if it causes him to stumble and sin, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, or I'll eat no flesh into the age. If it's going to cause others to stumble, I won't do it into the age. Now, he's not talking about catering to the cults out here. He's talking about hindering a weaker brother or hindering your witness to an unsaved that they might be brought to Christ. Now he says, I will eat no flesh into the age, lest I make my brother to offend or to stumble in his Christian walk. So we see the principle expounded here, that he says that meat offered in sacrifice to an idol, it's nothing. The idol is nothing. It doesn't change the meat in any way. But if it causes someone else to do wrong as a result of it, then you have sinned against him and against Christ. And so therefore we ought to be willing to give up anything like that, whatever it might be, not only just meat, a manner of life, a manner of dress, anything we should be willing to give up if it will hinder our witness or cause a weaker Christian to stumble. Now, in chapter 9, we see the principle exemplified by the Apostle Paul. And we see that Paul gave up his right to being supported in the ministry and right to wages, lest he hinder the cause of Christ. We also see that he gave up his right to a preferred way of life. He had a way of life that he would choose to have lived, but he lived in a way that he would not offend anyone so that he could win more to Jesus Christ. Now notice what he says in verses 1 through 18. Paul had given up his right to wages and support in the ministry, which he had every right to. He never did get it. In fact, elsewhere in the writings of Paul, we find that to those Corinthian believers, although he spent a year and a half there among them, he did not take a meal in the home of one of them. He didn't even take a meal from them, much less any pay in any way. And he built tents to support himself until he received a gift from Philippi, and then he held himself to the word because he had enough to eat and live on. Now, in chapter 9, he starts out by saying, am I not an apostle? Well, of course you are, Paul. Am I not free? Well, yes, you're free. Have I not seen Jesus Christ, the Lord of us, our Lord? Well, yes. Are not ye Corinthian believers, my work in the Lord? Were you not saved under my ministry? Well, yes. So, if I be not an apostle unto others, yet doubtless I am to you. Now, why would that be true? For the seal of mine apostleship are ye in the Lord. The fact that you're saved is a seal of the fact of my apostleship, because you were saved under my ministry. Now, mine answer. Now, the word answer here is the word apologia. Once we get the word apology, it means a defense. So my defense to them that do examine me is this. Have we, and now he's applying this to himself and Barnabas when he says we, have we not power, and this word power that appears several times down through this passage is not the word dunamis, power, it's the word exousia, which means authority, you're right. So have we not authority to eat and to drink? Have we not authority to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as the other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord, and Cephas or Peter? Well, what he's saying is this. Wives were supported with their husbands in the early church. However, a little later in the early church, this was abolished by the Council of Nicaea because of abuses of it. Well, we know that no one has any right, any council, any church body or nothing has the right to change anything in the Word of God. So, any servant of the Lord has a right for his wife to travel with him, be supported along. He says, have we not the authority to lead about a sister who is our wife, as well as the other apostles do it, and as the brethren of the Lord do it, and as Peter does it? Or I only and Barnabas? Are we the only ones that have not the authority to forbear working? Are we the only ones that have to work and support ourselves? Are we the only ones that do not have that right, while all of the others ministering do have it? So he asks the question, who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? that phrase goeth a warfare literally renders serves as a soldier. Who serves as a soldier any time at his own charges? Well, the answer is no one. Whoever enlists them to be a soldier supports them while they are serving as a soldier. Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of or out of the fruit thereof? Well, no one. If you plant a vineyard, you eat of that. Or who feedeth the flock and eateth not of or out of the milk of the flock? Well, of course, no one. Now, notice the imagery here that he has. A soldier, a farmer, and a shepherd. Now, the preacher goes forth to contend with the world in spiritual battle to win people to Christ. And then he plants churches as a farmer that plants, and then he shepherds the flock. Now, he says, who does all of these things without partaking out of it? Well, of course, the truth is no one. Now, he says, say I these things, am I saying this just as a man? Am I saying it just for my sake as a man about this? Or saith not the law the same also? Doesn't the law teach us the same thing? Of course it does. For it is written in the law of Moses, and that's in Deuteronomy 25:4, and it's also repeated in 2 Timothy 3:16. Now, 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 18. For it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Or literally, you shall not muzzle the mouth of the ox that is treading out the corn. While he's in the process of treading out, pulling that stone around and around to grind up the corn, he says, let him dip down and have a bite of it. Now, God said not to muzzle the mouth of the ox that's treading out the corn. Now, did God just say that for the sake of the oxen only? Doth God take care for oxen, or literally, doth God take care only for oxen? Is it just for oxen that he says this? Or saith he it altogether, or mainly for our sakes? Was it mainly said for the sakes of those who are ministering in the cause of Christ, either in Old Testament or New Testament times? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written. Now remember, Paul is writing this under the direct inspiration of the Spirit of God, and he says, for our sakes, no doubt, that is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope. Now, if you're out here plowing a field, you do it in hope that you're going to have a reaping and a harvest of something. And that he that threshes, he that goes out and threshes the wheat, he does it in hope, should be partaker of his hope. So, he does it hoping he's going to have some grain food out of that, and bread, so he's partaker of that hope. Now, if Barnabas and I have sown to you spiritual things, we've given our time, our effort, our ability to sow to you spiritual things, is it a great thing? Or the sense is it unjust or unequal or burdensome if we shall reap your carnal things? Is it too much to say that if we spend our time ministering to you the spiritual things, is it bad then or unjust if we partake of your carnal material things and your foods? Of course not. That's the same principle that you see under everything. If others be partakers of this power or authority over you, or should not we rather? Why, Paul? Because you were the ones that primarily ministered to them and brought them to Christ in salvation. So if anyone exercised that authority over you, it should be us. But we haven't, and others have. Nevertheless, we have not used this authority. We have the authority from God to partake of your things, but we never did do so. But rather we suffer, we bear up against, we endure all things. For what purpose? Why did you endure all of that, Paul? Lest, the word is hina, in order that we should not hinder the gospel of the Christ. We did it so that we would not hinder the gospel of Christ. Now, there's many people who think, well, that preacher, they're just out there to make the money. And I suppose it's true of some. But Paul did not have that, and not everyone today has that concept and idea of ministry. And as I've said often, I think there's more mercenaries in the so-called Christian ministry than there are ministers. Some will not serve at all unless they are well remunerated for what they're doing. That's not a minister, my friend. That's a mercenary. And Paul said, we did not want anyone to think that of us. We have not used this authority, but we bear up, we endure all things in order that we should not hinder the gospel of Christ. Do you not know, don't you know and understand this, that they which minister about holy things, that is, those sacred things, they live, or they feed, they eat of the things of or out of the temple, the outer temple? Don't you know that? That in the Old Testament system, those priests that ministered about holy things, sacred things, they had their life of eating out of the temple. Remember, the tithe of the grain and the fruit and all of their produce and everything was brought to the temple. And the priest and his family and household had their eating and living out of that. And don't you know that they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar? When the worshipers in the Old Testament system came in with an animal sacrifice, was the entire animal consumed in the flames unto God? No. You go back to the Old Testament scriptures and you find that it is laid down very clearly that when that sacrifice was brought, there was a designated portion of it. It was to be cut off, and it was to be used for the food for the priest and his family who was offering that sacrifice. Now, he said we have this authority to be supported, but we've never used it, lest we hinder the gospel of Christ. Now, you ought to understand that in the Old Testament system, they ate out of the outer temple, the storehouse. They that waited upon the altar, they became partakers of the altar. And he says, even so the Lord hath ordained that they which preach the gospel should live out from the gospel. Now, that doesn't mean you eat gospel. It means that you live out of the result of your ministering of the gospel. Now, we find that Christ taught this same thing in his ministry. Back in Matthew chapter 10 and verses 9 and 10, when Christ in his earthly ministry sent out the 12 to go out ministering, here's what he said to them. Provide neither gold, nor silver, nor brass in your purses. In other words, don't take any money with you. Don't take any extra money, nor script for your journey. Neither take 2 coats. Don't take 2 outfits. Neither shoes, nor yet staves. Why? Why do you not take anything extra? For the workman is worthy of his meat, or of his hire, his reward, his pay. What he's saying is don't take any extra money. Didn't say not to have any. He said don't take it. Now, he said don't take those things. Don't take 2 coats. Just go with the one. If it wears out, you need another one, expect them to provide it for you. Don't take extra shoes. Now, when I go out and traveling in meetings, I take 5 or 6 suits. I take several pairs of shoes. I have some extra money with me in case the car breaks down or anything like that happens. Now, I don't expect these things as Paul did, and I don't mean to compare myself to Paul, far from it, but I'm saying that this is what he said to do when he sent them out. Now, also, at another time in the ministry of Christ, he not only sent out the 12, but he sent out 70 to go out and minister. And in Luke chapter 10, verses 3 through 7, he gives them instructions as to what they are to do. Now, notice what he said. Luke 10, verse 3, go your ways. Now, this is sending out the 70 to go out and minister. Behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. In other words, you're not going to have an easy time out there. There's going to be people oppose you. They're going to make it rough on you. Carry neither purse, nor scrip, nor shoes. Do you see that? Don't take any extra clothing. And salute no man by the way. And into whatsoever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if the Son of Peace be there, your peace shall rest upon it. If not, it shall turn to you again. And in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire, his pay, his reward, his wages. Go not from house to house. So he says, wherever you go, expect them to feed you in these. And Christ taught the same thing. Now, that is what we are seeing here that Paul said. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live out of or out from the gospel. So, he says this should be done. But notice what Paul said in verse 15. But I have used none of these things. I have that right, but I haven't used any of it. Now, we're looking at the fact that Paul had given up his right to wages and being supported in his ministry because he did not want to hinder the cause of Christ. And he's saying, surely if I did that, you could give up eating that meat that had been offered in sacrifice to idols. You can give up that preferred way of dress or that habit of life that you have or something else that may hinder the cause of Christ. I gave up that much, and I did it because of a concern for the souls of men. Neither have I written these things that it should be done so unto me. I'm not writing this to you, Corinthians, so that you would do it to me. For it were better for me to die than that any man should make my glorying void. Now notice what he says here in verses 16 through 18. For though I preach the gospel, although I go out and preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. I don't have anything to glory and boast about. Why? Because necessity is laid upon me. The Lord gave me this job to do, and I'm his servant, and I have to do what he wants me to do. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. Woe if I don't go out and do what the Lord gave me to do. For if I do this thing willingly, if it's of my own will that I choose to do it, then I have a reward. I have hire or pay coming to me. But if against my will, it wasn't my choice, the Lord gave me this to do, then a dispensation, or literally a stewardship of the gospel is committed unto me. So what is my reward then? What is my pay? What is my hire? Truly this, verily or truly, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge. And why do you do it that way, Paul? That I abuse not, or that I use not to the full my power, my authority in the gospel. I do not want to use it that way. Now, another translation of verses 16 through 18 could be well rendered this way. For although I proclaim the glad tidings, yet this gives me no ground of boasting, for I am compelled to do so by order of my master. Yea, woe is me if I proclaim it not. For were my service of my own free choice, I might claim wages to reward my labor. But since I serve by compulsion, I am a slave entrusted with a stewardship. What then? What is my wage? It is to make the glad tidings free of cost wherever I carry it. Now, this is to a great extent the attitude I've always had. I've never asked anyone to give me anything. I just let the Lord provide as it comes. Now, if we have a concern for others, we will serve whether we get anything or not. Whether your expenses are covered or not. Whatever it is, you are willing to serve and to go on. So we see that Paul had given up his right to wages in being supported lest he would hinder the cause of Christ or cause some weaker brother to stumble. And also Paul had given up his right to a preferred way of life, as we see in verses 19 through 27 of chapter 9. Verse 19. He says, for though I be free from all men, and you are, he has freedom from everyone, yet have I made myself servant, bondservant, or bondslave unto all. I'm not bound to anyone. They don't have any authority over me, but I've voluntarily made my slave a servant to all. Why? That I might gain the more. In order that I might gain more of them, that I might win more of them to Christ. And unto the Jews became I as a Jew. I didn't become a Jew, but I became as a Jew. To what end, Paul? That I might gain the Jews. Now, Paul had his way that he would prefer to live. I have a way I would prefer to live. There's a lot of things I would like and enjoy and appreciate, but I don't have. And I don't take the time to go and to do those things. And Paul is the same way. even more so. And he says, unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, I became as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. Now, whatever type of people he was ministering to, he played into that type of life in order to win them. To them that are without law, as without law. I was as if I were without law, but then notice the explanation. Being not without law to God, but under or in or within the law to Christ. And why did you do it, Paul? That I might gain them that are without law. And then to the weak, to those who are weak ones, I became as weak. Not that I was weak, but I became as weak. Why? That I might gain the weak. We need to be willing to give up our preferred way of life, our pleasures and entertainments, or whatever else it might be, a manner of dress or anything. We should be willing to give up for the good of the cause of Christ, the salvation of others, and not to hinder weaker brethren in Christ. So he says, I am made, or literally, I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. I become all things to all people, that I might save some. Now, that does not mean what I've heard some people say over the years. Well, I go to these people, I want to win them, so I go to the bar room with them. No, 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 no. Paul never did do anything that was wrong or that would give a wrong picture, cause anyone to have a reason to speak down upon him. You see, if you did that and went in with the other people, and other people see you go in, they think you're going in there for the same purpose he did. They have every right to think that, and you hinder your witness. That's not what he's talking about. He said, I do this that I might save some. And this I do for, or dia, by means of or through the gospel. The word sake there is added by the translator, not gospel's sake, but he says, I do it by means of or through the gospel. Why? That I might be or become partaker or partner with it. Notice with you is in italics. The word thereof is with it. So he said, I do it by means of or through the gospel, that I might become a joint partaker and joint partner with it, with the gospel, that other people might be saved. Now he says, know ye not, don't you know and understand, that they who run in a race run all? Doesn't matter how many people are running this foot race out here, and they had a lot of those races in those Isthmus games back in those days. And he said people who ran in that, all of them were running, but only one received the prize. Doesn't matter how many people are running that race, only one could win and receive the prize. So he says, so run and continue to run. You run as if only one person were going to be rewarded by the Lord, that you may obtain. So run that you may obtain. Now, we know that every person will be rewarded for their service and labor, if it's gold, silver, and precious stone quality. And every man that striveth for the mastery, everyone that is striving in these games for the mastery, is temperate in all things. And when you read what was required of those people who were running in those games, in the foot race, they had to be very temperate for a year. They had to practice every day in rain, sleet, snow, hot weather, whatever. They had to be disciplined, and they had to abstain from their wives. That was a lot of self-discipline. They had to do those things in order to be prepared to run this race, and they're very temperate in all of those things. Every man that striveth for the master is temperate in all things. And they do it for what purpose? Now, they do it to obtain or to receive a corruptible crown, or a corruptible victor's crown. A little garland around their neck that's going to fade away. Corruptible crown. But we do it to receive an incorruptible crown. That which will never fade away, and we have eternally with Christ. So Paul says, I therefore so run. That's the way I live. That's the way I run. I live this life giving up my right to other things and keep my body in subjection. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly. I don't do it with an uncertainty. I know with certainty what I'm doing and why. So fight I, literally so box I. I'm out there boxing, not as one that beateth air. I'm not like the shadow boxer, but I keep under my body. Or literally, I buffet my body. I have to beat my body into subjection. I buffet my body and bring it into subjection. The old body wants what it wants in its old nature with its own desires. But by the enactment of our will, we must say, "Oh, self, you cannot have what you want. You cannot go where you'd like to go. You cannot enjoy the pleasures you'd like to enjoy. We're going to do what God would have us to do." This is the thing we need to be doing. So we need to bring the old body into subjection. Why? Lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway or rejected or be disapproved. You see, if we don't have a disciplined life, a controlled life lived under the direction of the Spirit of God, then we try to witness to others, then they're going to say, "Huh." And I've come across this so often, talking to people, and they tell about someone else and they're so pious and this, that, and the other, and yet they do this, and I would never do that myself. And sometimes believers do things that even the unsaved would not do. And this is a thing that causes a lot of disbelief. So he says, I have to keep under my body and bring it into subjection, not allow it to have what it wants, keep it very controlled, lest that by any means when I have preached to others, I myself should be disapproved or a castaway or rejected. Now, we need to be very careful. Paul had a way of life he would prefer to live, but he left it behind in preference to winning others to Jesus Christ. So we see the principle is expounded for us in chapter 8. It is exemplified in chapter 9, and Paul gives us examples of his own life. And now in chapter 10, the principle is expanded and explained for us. And we have here the past example, the present practice, and the future results. Now notice, first of all, the past example in the first 14 verses. Moreover, or literally that little Greek word de, which means but. But, brethren. Now, he is speaking to the brethren there in Corinth who had asked him this question about the propriety of eating meat offered unto idols. I would not that you should be ignorant. Now, when the Word of God says, I would not have you to be ignorant about something, we need to become aware of it and know what he's talking about. How that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized or placed in the new relationship into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Now I want you to know and understand about that. And they did all eat the same spiritual meat. That is, they had that manna that came from God daily. And did all drink the same spiritual drink. For they drank of or out of a spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Now, remember at times they wanted water and the Lord had Moses to smite the stone. And smiting the stone, and Christ is referred to as the stone in the Word of God. And so here we're told it was Christ that provided that water for them out of the stone. Now, that rock that followed them was Christ. So he said, I want you to be aware of that. But with many, although they had all of that, They followed Moses. They went through the Red Sea. They partook of the manna. They had that water provided. They had everything provided for them by the Lord. But with many, or literally most of them, God was not well pleased. Did you get that? With most of them, God was not well pleased at all. Why? For they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now, what do you mean by that? Well, when they came to Kadesh Barnea, They all said, oh, we want the leeks, onion, garden, melons back in Egypt and all of those things. And they refused to go in and take the land that God had promised them. And only Joshua and Caleb were the only ones that said, let's go. God said he'd give it to us. Let's trust him and go take it. They said, we can't. There's giants down there. Now, verse 6 says, now these things were our examples to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted or desired. Now, what were the evil things they lusted for? Well, they lusted after the flesh pots of Egypt. They said, oh, we'll go back to Egypt where we have the leeks and the onions, the garlic, the cucumbers, and the melons. Well, what's wrong with those things? Nothing. But that's desiring something good that is less than God's best. God provided them the manna and all else cared for them. Their clothes didn't wear out. Their shoes didn't wear out. God provided all those things. They said, oh, we go back to Egypt where we have the leeks, onions, garlic, and melons and cucumbers. So God sent them quail to eat. Remember that? They complained about that manna, that light bread. And then he destroyed many of them while they were eating. He filled them to full and destroyed them. Now, these things were examples to the intent we should not lust after these evil things as they lusted. Let's be careful that we don't desire after what is provided just because it's cheaper, that we can get that meat that has been offered in sacrifice to an idol and fill our stomachs. Let's be concerned about what influence we're going to have upon others above everything else. Now, verse 7, neither be ye or become ye idolaters as some of them. Now, some of those that God led out, they became idolaters. As it is written, and it's written in the book of Exodus, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. While Moses was on the mountain receiving the law, Aaron made a golden calf to be worshipped, and they frolicked and played around and implied even immoral activity taking place. And so God's judgment had to fall upon them. And then in verse 8, neither let us commit fornication as some of them committed and fell in one day 23,000. That's in Numbers 25, 1 through 9. Verse 9, neither let us tempt Christ as some of them also tempted. Or they fairly tempted. They tried him to the uttermost and were destroyed of the serpents. Numbers 21, 4 through 9. We find that recorded for us. Neither murmur ye in verse 10. Neither murmur ye. And that is a present active imperative. You don't murmur, and you should never murmur, as some of them also murmured and were destroyed by the destroyer. They murmured because of giants in the land, and all died in the wilderness but Joshua and Caleb. That is, all above 20 years of age. Now he says, all these things happened unto them for examples. Or it was for an example, it was for a type to us. And they are written for our admonition and learning, warning for us, upon whom the ends of the ages, not world, but ages are come. Wherefore, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed, lest he fall. We need to be very aware of this, that when we think that we stand, we've got it all under control. We have it. We're stand. We could never fall. Nothing could ever happen to us. Take heed when you think you stand, lest you fall. I've had many examples of this and seen it in experience in my life. I remember several years ago in the pastoral ministry, a young man, I talked with him about some things. He said, oh, I would never do anything like that. Not me. That's something. I said, be careful. Take heed lest you think you stand, lest you fall. Oh, I know, but I'd never do that. He made his boast and bragged what he would never do. It was a matter of weeks he was involved in that particular sin. Need to be careful. We're all capable of falling because we're all human beings. We are all human beings. We still have the old sinful nature as well as the nature of the Spirit of God within us, and we're capable. So be careful lest you fall. So don't think you have such knowledge that you can do these things because you know there's nothing wrong. But you can fall and cause others to fall if you exercise that right. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man, or literally, there's no temptation taken you except what belongs to man. But God is faithful whenever any temptation comes. God is faithful, who will not suffer or allow you to be tempted above that you're able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it or endure it. Now, are we looking for God to do some special work? No. You see, we have the nature of God within us, and if by the enactment of our will we willfully subject to Him and yield to Him and to His will as expressed in the Word of God, then we will overcome the temptation. We will not be taken by them. We have what is necessary to overcome and be victorious if we will just choose to do so. The choice is ours. Now, wherefore, my dearly beloved, wherefore, my highly valued ones, flee from idolatry. Flee from giving yourselves to anything else other than the things of God. Now, we see the present example that existed through Israel and what they ought to be doing themselves. And now we see the present practice in verses 15 through 22. Now, I speak as unto wise men. I'm speaking to you now as if you were wise, so take this in. Judge ye what I say. Now, you make a judgment of what I am saying, and that's an aorist active imperative. At any point in time, you make judgment of what I'm going to say to you. Now, you understand it. Verse 16, the cup of blessing, the eulogius, the cup of well spoken of, which we bless or we speak well of. It's another form of the word eulogia. Is it not the communion? Is it not the joint participation of the blood of Christ? Now, in what we call the communion service or the Lord's table, the memorial supper, more literal terminology, the grape juice, we are partaking of the blood of Christ. Now, not that it's actual blood, but it represents that blood of Christ. The bread which we break, is it not a joint participation of the body of the Christ? The bread represents the broken body of Christ. It was broken on our behalf. For we being many are one bread. Many of us as believers, yet we're one bread and one body. For we are all partakers of that one bread who is Christ. All of us as believers, you Corinthian believers, myself, we're all partakers of that one bread. Now, that we partake of. But now also, behold, Israel after the flesh. Look at Israel according to the flesh. Are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altars, or joint participants of the altar? Now, remember the priest, as the worshiper brought an animal sacrifice, a portion of it was consumed in flames unto the Lord, and a portion of it was for the priest and his family to eat. So they jointly participated with the altar of those things. Now, what say I then? What am I saying by saying this? Am I saying that the idol is anything? Or am I saying that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything or is changed in any way? No, no. But I say, here's what I say, that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, that meat they offer in sacrifice to their idol, the things which they sacrifice to devils or literally demons, and not to God. So that meat that's being offered in sacrifice to an idol is being offered to demons, because all false religions are stimulated by the activity of demons. That's very clear in the Word of God. So they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I would not that you should have fellowship or join and participate with demons. So if you partake of that meat that's been offered in sacrifice to an idol, then I don't want you to be partaking with a demon, because they offer it to demons. And all of those false religions are demonic inspired. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils or demons. You cannot be partakers or joint participants of the Lord's table and of the table of devils or demons. Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Or do we do that? Do we provoke the Lord to jealousy by doing it? Are you stronger than He, or literally not stronger than He, are we? You're not stronger than the Lord, are we? Let's be careful that we don't offend the Lord and sin against Him and that weaker brother by doing these things and participating with demons. Now, all things are lawful for me. Now, all things are lawful for me to do, but all things are not expedient. Now remember, we said back in chapter 6 that there's a threefold test for sin. First of all, there's the test of expediency right here. Is it good for the cause of Christ? Does it leave you free to run the Christian race without hindrance to others? So all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. They're not conducive to advantage or profitable for the cause of Christ. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. So there's a test not only of expediency, but the test of edification. Does it build up? The word edify means to build up. And then there's the test of enslavement that we saw in 1 Corinthians 6:12. Are we brought under the power of any? They're lawful for me, but I'll not be brought under the power of any. Are you enslaved by it? Is there any habit of life that you cannot break? Are you a slave to it? Whatever it might be. Now, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. Let no man seek his own. Now, let seek is one word. It's a present active imperative. Present tense, you do it, you continue to do it without cessation. Active means it's your responsibility to actively do it, not God make you do it. Imperative means that it's absolutely essential to do it if you want to be right with God. So let no man seek his own. Don't be seeking things for yourself and your own good and benefit, but every man another's welfare or well-being. Now, it doesn't say that I'm just trying to get somebody else's wealth. That's not what he's saying. But another's welfare or well-being or advantage. So I'm not to be so selfishly concerned for myself, and that's what we have through the entire book of Philippians, and the center of the message of it is Philippians 2:5. Let this mind, thinking, or attitude be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. An attitude of humility in which you're concerned for others more than for self. So it said, it's imperative that no man seek his own, but that we all seek the advantage or benefit of others. So, he says, whatsoever is sold in the shambles, that is, in the marketplace. Anything they're selling out there in the marketplace, meat or anything else, that eat. Buy it, eat it. Asking no questions for conscience sake. Don't ask any question. Was this offered as sacrifice to idol or was it not? Just buy it. If they don't say so and it's not advertised, if they say it is or advertised, then don't get it. But if you don't know, then he says, buy it and eat it. Ask no questions for conscience sake. Why? For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. It all belongs to Him. So get it and use it. But if any of them that believe not, if an unbeliever bid you to a feast, that word bid is a present active imperative. It's imperative that you go, and you have to go, and you be disposed to go. You have to go because it's an imperative thing. Whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no questions for conscience sake. Now, if you are invited to this feast that you have to go to, whatever they have to eat, just eat it. Don't ask any questions about it. But if any man say unto you, if anyone there says, this meat is offered in sacrifice unto idols, then what do? He says, eat not. Eat not. Don't eat it if someone tells you it was offered in sacrifice to an idol. Because if you do, he has every right to think you're eating it with an attitude and adoration toward that idol. So eat not for his sake that showed it. Do it for the sake of that individual. And for conscience sake. Whose conscience? The one that showed it to you. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. But conscience, I say, not thine, not your own, but of the other. But you ask the question then, well, why is my liberty judged by, of, or under another man's conscience? Why is my liberty judged under another man's conscience? For if I, by grace or with thanksgiving, be a partaker, why am I evil spoken of? For or over that for which I give thanks? Here's the answer. Whether therefore you eat or drink. Doesn't matter what you do. Whether you eat or drink or anything else. Or whatsoever you do. It doesn't matter what it is. Whether it's eating, drinking, going somewhere, participating in some activity. Whatever it might be that you may do. Do all. The word all is a plural word. Do all things to the glory of God. We should never be involved in any kind of activity, service, foods, any kind of a thing that cannot be glorifying to God. Things we do should not be just for self-pleasure and gratification, but for the good of the glory of God. Now, all these things that we do for the glory of God, he says in doing it, give none offense. The word give means become not. It's a present middle imperative. Become ye not offensive or a stumbling block. Don't become an offense or a stumbling block, neither to the Jews. Don't do anything that will cause a Jew not to believe. Nor to the Gentiles, that is, the nations of the world. Don't do anything that would cause them to stumble. Nor to the church of God, nor to any believers. That includes all humanity. So don't do anything to ever give offense to anyone, saved or unsaved. And do it even as I also please all men in all things. Did you get what Paul said? He's not just bragging on himself. He's writing this under the direct inspiration of the Holy Spirit of God, and God says it's true about Paul. You do this even as I please, or I strive to please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit or good or advantage or welfare or benefit. I'm not seeking things for my own good, but for the profit, the good, the advantage, the welfare, the benefit of the many. I do it for the majority of humanity. Why? That they may be saved. So it's not just eating meat that's been offered in sacrifice to idols, as expounded in chapter 8. But it is exemplified through Paul's life of what he gave up in chapter 9. Then we have the principle expanded and explained by the past example of the Jews passing through the wilderness, the present practice in Israel as well as in the church, and then the future results of all of this should be all that we do should be for the glory of God, and that many might be saved. Now, chapter 11, verse 1 is the conclusion of this whole thing. So he says, be ye followers. That word followers is the Greek word mimetai, from which we get the word mimic. So be ye mimics of me. Well, if we mimic Paul, what will we be doing? Verse 33 of chapter 10. As I strive to please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit or benefit of the many, that they may be saved. So if we do what God would have us do, we would mimic that manner of life in Paul. Be mimics of me, even as I also am of Christ. Christ, again, Philippians 2:5. Christ had a love and a concern for humanity more than he did for his own life, more than he did for his own financial and material and social well-being. He who in heaven had all the fellowship of the persons of the Holy Trinity, the holy angels, in heaven were the streets of gold, yet he came to earth and lived in poverty. He fellowshiped with sinners. He came not to save the righteous, but the sinners, the lost. He fellowshiped with them. He never had a home, never had a bed. And he who was the creator and the giver of life gave his life that mankind might be saved. He had a concern for others more than for self. Paul said, that is my attitude of life, and I want you to be mimics of me. Not just eating meat offered in sacrifice to idols, but whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God, giving none offense to Jews, Gentiles, nor to the church of believers. We need to be extremely careful how we live and what we manifest to others about us in our daily life.